This is AUGforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered and independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. First, thank you to our sponsor itself and Velixo. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention two more things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, I'm always looking for victims, guests on the podcast. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn about being a guest on the podcast. Second, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out the instructions at AUG Today is Tuesday, October 5th, 2021, and this is episode number 51, Acumatica versus Dynamics GP with David Eichner. David, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
So you are a podcasting veteran, and yeah, I'm looking forward to this. You're gonna help me out here, maybe up the game on this podcast.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. So, would you like me to introduce myself? And
yeah, let's hear the brief, and then let's dive into. I love getting the background, the detailed background,
sure,
and where you've been before you got to where you're at now.
Well, currently today, I'm the CEO of ICAN Software Solutions. I am training my daughter actually become CEO, and I'm actually going to become chairman of the board of ICAN Software Solutions. I am training my daughter actually become CEO, and I'm actually going to become chairman of the board. Our company has been around since 1999. Prior to that, I worked for a CPA firm that did Dynamics GP consulting. And after the Arthur Andersen debacle, they decided they did not want to be in the consulting business anymore. And they turned over all of their GP clients to me and said, take care of them. So I started ICAN Software Solutions at that point in 99. And we grew the company over the next 20 years or so. Well, not 20, let's see, 13, 14 years. And in 2012, I discovered Acumatica. And this had been after Microsoft had been kind of making the partner for smaller partners. They seemed to be focusing on the big partners and writing their partner program for the big partners. And at that point in time, I looked at the architecture of GP, which, as you know, was built in the late 80s, early 90s, is a client server architecture. And for people that don't know that term, client server just means that all the processing is happening on a workstation. The data resides on the server. So if there's any interruption between the two, things go bad, corrupted data in the application. And it's just not a modern architecture like Acumatica is. So we decided to start selling Acumatica at that point. And I'm proud to say anybody that looks at Acumatica versus GP will shift to Acumatica, at least in our experience. And so we've been full bore with Acumatica since then. We had developed a number of ISV products for the GP community, some of which Acumatica doesn't need because it already has that functionality. But some of the functionality we developed for GP was also needed in Acumatica. And so we'll talk about some of those products. We've written those products for Acumatica. We're now marketing those products. We'll talk a little bit more later about those products. And to step back a little bit, before I became an ERP consultant, I was actually a ROTC scholarship student at the University of Washington with the Navy. I actually started out as a Marine Corps scholarship, but I realized once I got to the campus that with a scholarship, but I realized once I got to the campus that with a signature on a piece of paper, it could be converted into a Navy scholarship because Marine Corps is a part of the Navy. And I decided if I wasn't going to be able to fly jets, I didn't want to be, storming the beaches. So I ended up going with the Navy scholarship. Thought I was going to be Top Gun, right? Thought I was going to be a fighter pilot, get all the girls and, have fun flying fighter jets, at speed of sound. But that did not happen. My eyes went slightly less than 20/20 by the end of my college career. And I wasn't going to be able to be a pilot. And they said, well, how about you go into the Navy nuclear power program and be a nuclear trained officer on a submarine. And I was kind of like, well, okay, business major. I decided I wanted to learn a little bit about engineering. So I got accepted into the program to be a submarine officer. And I went through essentially a master's degree in engineering in about 6 months, where we had training classes from 7 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. And then we had homework till midnight. And because I was struggling, I was on mandatory study hours, 16 hours a weekend. So I'm proud to say I managed to survive that educational experience. If you dropped below a 2.5 GPA, they kicked you out. So I was at 2.51 for the first 3 months of the 6-month period. And I managed to, by the end of the period, I got it up to 3.1. So I was able to successfully get through that 6 months period. I got it up to 3.1. So I was able to successfully get through that 6 months. And then you go to reactor training, where you actually operate a prototype reactor out in the desert or somewhere out in the rural part of the country where if it blows up, or if it melts down, nobody cares. Went through that 6 months and then 3 months of training in Connecticut at the sub school. And then I was off to a ballistic missile submarine out of Charleston. And I ended up being a qualified nuclear engineer and strategic weapons officer certifications before I decided that 3 months in a metal tube at a time was not what I wanted to do the rest of my life. So I've actually crawled inside of the launch tubes above the warheads to inspect warheads when we were onloading and offloading. I've been in a fire on a submarine when we were onloading and offloading. I've been in a fire on a submarine, which is an exciting experience when old circuit breakers get too old, they start to short and they cause fires. I've had a flooding experience on the submarine where we had 6 feet of water in the lower part of the submarine. So some experiences in life that not everybody gets. But I decided after I got out, I kind of fell back into the family biz, which all my father and my brother were accountants. And
how long was that on the Navy
submarine
experience, end to end?
4 years of service after about a year of training.
Okay.
Yeah, so you got to pay back your time when you have an ROTC scholarship. You get 4 years of college, 4 years of service.
You crammed a lot in there. Sounds like
I did. Yeah. I did. And I learned how to learn, which is a skill that has really helped me in the IT world. And I went back to school at night while I was working for a company called NEPCO when I first got out of the Navy, doing payroll and job costing within that organization, and then helping them with an RFP for a new financial ERP system. And I kind of got the bug there of technology and financial systems. And then I went to work for the city of Redmond, Washington, where Microsoft is located. I worked there programming payroll and HR with their system. It was an old system called Ross Systems. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it was ran on an AS400, but it allowed you to program how your payroll and benefits would actually calculate. So rather than kind of having fixed select code and use the values of other things during the runtime of the payroll processing. So it's pretty sophisticated, simply because municipal environments have very strange union contracts sometimes that will require really strange pay codes or benefit codes in terms of those amounts and calculations. So we did that for a little bit. I'm actually one of the few people that walked away from Amazon prior to them going public. I went and worked for Amazon for about 6 months. If I had stayed there for the 4 years to vest, I would have around $800 million today. So I want
oh, ouch.
every once in a while I recalc what it's at now and hurt myself. But at the time, I was the only married person. At Amazon. It was when they were still, in Seattle, with the desks were cardboard boxes with door frames, like a door, wood door over the boxes. So pretty early on, like 96, 97 timeframe. But my wife was pregnant with our second child, and I was working 80, 90 hours a week, and it wasn't working out for our family. And the CPA firm came along and offered me a job where they said, we will teach you everything about technology, Microsoft technologies, Great Plains software or Dynamics GP training, everything. And so for the first year working at the CPA firm, all I did was go to classes and get certifications, paid for by the CPA firm. So I ended up doing that old AS400 system and into Dynamics GP, and got that company up and running prior to Y2K, so that they wouldn't, stop. And at about that time is when the CPA firm decided to spin off their GP clients to me, and I founded ICAN software at that point in time, and that kind of catches us up to where we are today, working with Acumatica. Very excited about working with a modern platform that we have seen the benefits for our clients in the last 2 years with COVID, being able to operate remotely from home without a huge amount of effort. It was really important for a number of our clients. And GP and Acumatica, I felt like my head was going to explode when I first started learning Acumatica after GP. I'll admit, I knew GP inside and out. I knew all the back end tables. I programmed in Dexterity, which is their proprietary programming language for add-ins for GP. There wasn't much about GP I didn't know. And yet, when I started learning Acumatica, it felt like the world had suddenly expanded, maybe tenfold, right, in terms of the complexity and in terms of the capabilities. I would talk to some of my GP partner friends, and I would say, look, all these things you have to sell separately, like credit card processing, right? GP does not have a built-in card processing functionality. You have to go buy a credit card processing solution to add into GP if you want to do credit card processing. That was huge to me. I was like, I would tell people, I'd say, look, even QuickBooks has credit card processing built into it. Why does Dynamics GP not have that, right? Tax calculations, right? If you wanted to have a tax engine, you had to go buy one from one of the third-party vendors, either Avalara or all the different add-ins. I don't remember all of them for GP, but things like that, or shipping add-ins were always something you had to charge a client more for. And I hated that. I hated things that it just seemed like that should just be a part of the ERP system to let you select which one you want to work with and just activate it, right? Put something in. And you'll see things like eBiz Charge is a great example, right? They just want to be your processor. They'll give you the add-in. They're not going to sell you the add-in, right? They give it to you. You install it, and yeah, you're processing credit cards right away. So those were some of the things that jumped out at me was, okay, there's no available, easily available integrations for certain things that just should be there. Credit card processing, shipping, taxes, those types of things.
I think it's interesting that you list those things first, because I would think that with GP being just around so long, I would have thought that would have been a plus for GP with breadth of functionality. And, you would have maybe seen more that Acumatica could do in the future. So I think it's really more that Acumatica could do in the future. So I think it's really interesting that you bring that up as your first point, not strength of platform, not, the geeky technology stuff, but
well, that was the first thing
I
noticed. Yeah, that was the first thing I noticed was features, right? Not so much platform.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Especially, so like, give me time frame again. What year is this that you're noticing?
This is about 2012, I think.
Yeah, especially then. That's
yeah.
very interesting. Okay.
So then we started looking at platforms, right? The customizations. We had a client that was running on Dynamics SL, and they were running such an old version of Solomon that they had to stay on Windows XP as their desktop operating systems so that their Solomon would continue to work. And the owner of the company wanted to build for the future. And the owner of the company wanted to build for the she wanted to turn over the company to her son, and she wanted to get them on a current modern financial system. But they had some unique requirements that custom programming had been done on Solomon, and they needed to meet those requirements. Specifically, they needed to have the ability to have kind of like sub items, but I steered clear of the parent-child items that Acumatica had simply because I had heard so many bad things from other partners about it.
Good move.
And we created kind of our own. We just created a single table that was the primary. We called it the base document table because they sold standards documents, right? They're a reseller for all the different standards documents, whether it's mill standards, standards, every standards document that's out there, ISO 9000, whatever it is. They're a reseller, and they pay royalties back to whoever writes those documents. Well, a document could have multiple revisions, right? And they wanted to be able to notify anybody that had purchased a previous version of one of those documents. They wanted to be able to send an email blast out to say, hey, there's a Rev, T now instead of Rev S. And hey, would you like to buy this new version, right? So we looked at what they had done in Solomon, and it was not simple. There was a simpler solution. So we created the base document table using the platform in Acumatica that made it so easy, right? I just created the table in Acumatica, said, create an object that represents the table, boom, easy as pie. It created the object, and then we could code with that. And then we added a user-defined field to the items in the non-stock items, right? These are digital items, so they don't need to have inventory kept. They're PDFs. So we created all the child documents as non-stock items. We put a user-defined column that linked it to the base document. We added a couple of user-defined fields for date last notified on the AR TRAN, which is the lines of the AR invoice. So and also a contact ID that linked to a contact to email too. So the next step was we had to bring in 40 years of AR history. And this was pretty big, but they wanted to see it in action before they would buy Acumatica. So on a spare laptop, I set up Acumatica running on a spare laptop at the time, and I just uploaded millions of inventory items, 500,000 customers, and 40 years of AR history, right, into this database. Now, it took a while. The owner had been an ERP consultant before and said, look, I understand you need to make some money. We'll pay you for your consulting efforts to prototype this, do a proof of concept so we can see what kind of performance Acumatica has. And even on my my spare laptop, we were able to look up an item out of the inventory, millions of items, in about 4 to 5 seconds. So that speaks to the performance of the platform as well as how easy it is to customize it. They were kind of amazed because they were used to waiting a minute, 2 minutes in Solomon. And because of the performance of Acumatica, they actually had reasonable lookup times for items, a couple seconds, to be able to look up an item. We also then created a generic inquiry for them to see the list and the emails of the people that need to be notified whenever, on a regular basis. They didn't want to, they were actually on a very, I don't remember what it was called, standard or simple edition or some sort of thing like that back then. And it didn't have the emailing capability. But that was okay for them. They just took it out of a generic inquiry into Word and did mass, but that was okay for them. They just took it out of a generic inquiry into Word and did mass, mail merge out of Word. But the cool thing is, and eventually we'll be able to get them to the point where they can just push a button and mass email out of Acumatica. When they're ready, we don't want to push them too much on it, but when they're ready, that capability will be available for them. And it worked. They looked at it, they said, oh, wow, we've got this. And then it was basically saying, okay, well, we've got all the data in here. We just need to start on the first of the year and go live. And so we didn't have to redo any of the integrations. We just took the data that we had there, went live with it, and they started paying a license for Acumatica. So one of the nice things with Acumatica I like is, number one, you can prototype it. You can do a proof of concept with it. And with 1 or 2 users, I think it's up to 2 users when you're testing and prototyping stuff like this, right, before you get a license put in. But it allowed us to prove that what they had before could be done a lot more elegantly and a lot more simply with less code, less convoluted code within a platform that they could access from anywhere, from home, when they're on the road. They have that ability to access from anywhere.
I wish more sales cycles function like that, where the client is just recognizes that you get what you pay for. If you don't pay for it, you just get a rush sales cycle. You get all the bling, and you don't really get into the details. If you pay someone to prototype it and you treat it like a consulting engagement, you're going to be much more confident. If you do go with Acumatica, there might be another product that would fit your needs better. But you did more upfront effort like you did there, and I wish more sales cycles worked that way. That's great.
I do too. It's not all the time that you bump into a decision maker who's actually implemented ERPs before. I think that was the difference, is having a business owner who has done it, realizes, hey, there's work involved in a proof of concept, right? But if you really want to make sure you're making the right decision, having a proof of concept project, where you set up an engagement letter and you say, look, we're going to do this proof of concept. We're going to bill you for the hours involved in this proof of concept, but it's going to be way less upfront cost to make a decision as to whether or not this is a good fit for you going forward long term.
Well,
Now,
and
I
even if
think,
Acumatica is the best solution, ERP implementations always get tough. There's always a point where
exactly. So, and we've done other implementations where we've learned a lot of the different products. So we implemented internally, we implemented field service for our time and expense billings rather than project. And I'd like to just kind of discuss why we did.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
So I liked the fact of being able to use the scheduling calendar for field service. I also like the fact to be able to bill automatically based on those appointments without having any kind of human interaction. I'm all about automation and making things that can be done automatically happen as much as possible within the financial system. And I think this is another area that Acumatica is really good at, but and and two, that you have the ability to kind of think outside the box with Acumatica on how you do that. And one of those ways, right, of course, is automation schedules. So as long as our staff remembers to enter their time via the mobile app when they're doing their consulting, right? So if we have the appointments set up, they can enter the time on the appointment. They can mark it, closed, and we set up our appointment billing to automatically run at the end of each week. So on the weekend, it will automatically bill any closed, unbilled appointments. So even if our staff are late and they put it in, the next week, it'll still get rolled into the automatic billing. It automatically emails, right? So we set up another automation schedule to email those invoices. We then set up another process scheduled to release those invoices or post, as GP people would say. So that process, we have essentially no billing people. Our billing person is Acumatica, right? And then we said, well, let's look at for the products that we've written for GP and for Acumatica.
One sec. I want to drill on it a little bit. So what about time correction? So let's say, you need to do a negative entry the next week, because I think that's always the fear and why people do time reviews. Were you able to do that against an appointment?
Well, you don't really need to do it against the appointment. If you had something that was, do a credit memo against the invoice, right? We're using by line item. And another feature in Acumatica that GP doesn't have is the ability to apply payments or credit memos against specific line items.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I like
so
that.
Combine that together. We also automated the contract billing for subscriptions like Acumatica.
But one sec, I got something else on the time entry. So
okay,
you talk about scheduling the appointments. I think that's interesting because it almost sounds like you got more project management functionality out of field service than you would have out of the projects module in the terms of the scheduling. I like that. But when you say scheduling, does that mean you're setting them up beforehand? And does that mean your consultants are not having to make up descriptions of what they did? They're just charging time to sort of standard descriptions that are already set up on the appointments.
Exactly. We're trying to keep for consultants. What else? Questions on field service?
The appointment's like a pre-approved block of time that has a description. So why do I have to put a description when I spend time on it? I know I'm billing against a budget, and it might be a very small budget because it's an appointment, but you're almost doing like task management at that point by doing it that way.
And if they need to put more time on it, they can, right? So it's one of those things. Plus, you get the ability to get a customer sign off, right, on the phone, the mobile app. And we haven't talked much about the free mobile app, but I mean, GP doesn't have a free mobile app, right, that you can utilize on the go. all of the features in the mobile app for field consultants, right? If I have to drive out there, I can, get directions. If I have expenses along the way, I can embed those on the appointment as part of the process of recording that. So there's so much in the field service, and frankly, it was easier to set up field service than project. So, I mean, unless you're having to do really sophisticated large projects that, are using, percentage of completion type billing and things of that nature, we don't do those types of things. We bill on a time and expense basis, right? And, we
What
may have
about on the appointment time approval? So you said you get it over the phone, or did you have a way to sort of like auto email out anytime that estimate changes and you get a response back so it's been approved?
we don't really do that very often, but you could. That would be something you could probably configure or customize in the Field Service Edition if you needed that. But we just looked at in the Field Service Edition if you needed that. But we just looked at our time and expense stuff, even for implementations. We use the field service for all those appointments and capture those hours in field service. We modified our invoices so that the lines of the invoices have the dates of the appointments. We just linked the tables from the ARTran back to the originating appointments.
I think that's great. Sorry, I'll let you keep going with further
Okay.
automation here.
So other automation, right? So one thing that ISV partners for every ERP system struggle with is recurring billings, right? Billing every year, maybe on an anniversary date, having a system that puts those out automatically is something we discovered within Acumatica. That puts those out automatically is something we discovered within Acumatica. So we set up all of our recurring billings, whether they're monthly subscriptions, whether they're annual subscriptions. We have the contract set up. We have templates in the contracts for different products that we sell. So it's easy to set up a contract very quickly and activate it. We can collect not only in the GP world, right? You have a base license and then you have an annual software maintenance because they have perpetual licensing. They don't really have a subscription life. Well, I guess they do, but it's very difficult to try to get a subscription license set up with Microsoft. So we looked at the contract billing functionality within Acumatica, and we said, okay, this would be great for all of our annual subscriptions of the contract. So different partners, some partners want to be notified 3 months ahead, some 2 months ahead. So we could set those up days in advance in terms of sending the invoices to our partners, and then they'd have time to be able to bill their customers, get the money back, send us the payment, and all of that. The other nice thing with eBiz Charge allows you to have their portal, right? So you can set up a scheduled routine that would move your invoices up to the eBiz Charge portal. They notify the customer can make payment, and then you have another scheduled routine that pulls down the payments received for those invoices back into Acumatica. So if they're paying with a credit card through that process, there's no interaction that we have to do from an accounting standpoint. If we get checks in the mail, of course, then we have to enter those as cash receipts into Acumatica. But we've essentially, the only thing we have to do from an accounting standpoint, we're a small company, so we don't even really use the payable system. I'll be honest, we don't use AP in Acumatica. We just do everything in our bill pay and bring it in via the bank rec. So we essentially, our accounting is doing a bank rec where we categorize the expenses as they come in, and the revenue is, matches up, with the receipts that we've had. We enter the cash receipts. and we do the bank rec. And that's essentially it. Our accounting system runs on automatic for everything else. So those are some things where we've utilized automation schedules, but I wanted to mention a client of ours that actually taught me something, and I wanted to share that with everyone else as well. So one of the things that you can do to automate payments, if you do have a payables system, one is part of Acumatica now with their document recognition, right? So this is something GP does not have, but with Acumatica, with a system email account, you could set up an email account for your payables at, let's say, ICANsoftware.com. And when you have that document recognition module, it will read that incoming PDF that's attached to that email coming into that system email account, and will create the AP record, the AP bill for you using OCR. And you can then verify that that's correct and bring those in. So this using OCR, and you can then verify that that's correct and bring those in. So that's one way you can automate the payables process within Acumatica that I think everybody should be taking advantage of. You can also drag and drop from Outlook. I believe the Outlook add-in, which is available for Acumatica, I think you can use that interface to bring those AP bills in as well. But then the other piece that this client kind of taught me about is, how can I automate the payment process where I don't have to print anything myself? And there's a couple of different products out there, but the one that they brought to my attention, and the one I think everybody should be using, is a product called Paymerang. And Paymerang is essentially an outsourced payment provider who will actually print your checks and mail them for you to your vendors. And they do it for free, which is really cool. And your first thought is, okay, how are they making money? Well, what they do is they turn around, you upload your list of vendors, you upload, who you want to pay. And they, when you upload the remittance information for them to pay those vendors, they approach the vendors and they say, hey, would you like to get that payment faster? Would you like to get it overnight with an ACH transfer? And if the vendor says yes, then they charge them a fee. So if the vendor says no, then Paymerang will send them a check. They'll handle the printing of the check. They'll handle the mailing of the check to the vendor. So you're no longer paying for check printers. You're no longer paying for check stock. But if you do a large enough volume, and most companies are looking at Acumatica, I think, would qualify for this, then they not only do it for free, they give you a percentage of the fees that they collect. And you can actually turn accounts payable into a revenue center within your organization. Let that sink in.
Yeah, I went through exactly the same experience, but it was with AvidPay. And it was the same exact realization. I mean, you add up just the cost of the envelope and the stamp and the hassle of paper cuts. And there's a cost there. This makes it a revenue center. I went through exactly the same realization. And it's a no-brainer. Everyone should do it. Any thoughts though on how Paymerang compares to AvidPay?
I haven't looked at AvidPay. Does AvidPay write you a check back? Do they send you money back?
Same thing.
Write you a check back? Do they send you money back?
Same thing. Yeah, and they'll do.
Okay.
Actually, they'll take anyone. You could be small enough, and there will be like a per payment fee. But their per payment fee was actually cheaper than my math on a stamp plus an envelope, and it was the same reason. They're motivated to then go out and get vendors to convert to digital. They take a piece of it, but they'll do the same thing. And then it all comes into the finance math, right? Which one is better for your organization? You could probably go out to both and see which one gives you a better deal.
Paymerang doesn't charge you per payment though.
Right. But it all comes back into how much the kickback is, right? How much the percentage is. So
That's
you could
true.
look at both and you could have them run it on your numbers and see which one, based off of your
Good point.
estimated volume is going to
Good
give you a
point.
better solution, right?
Yeah, because maybe they're giving you a bigger percentage, even though you're paying a payment fee, you may be getting a bigger percentage back. Yeah, good point. I hadn't thought of that.
But either way, it beats checks. It beats the hassle.
Yes.
It beats checks. It beats the hassle
Yes.
of it. And
Why are
it, like
people
you
still
said,
using?
it's a revenue source.
Right? I mean, doesn't everybody in accounting want to be a revenue source? So, those are a couple of ways that I see just no brainers in the era of digital transformation, right, and resilience and working from anywhere, right? If we have to get locked down again. The other piece that I was going to mention, and it kind of slipped my mind.
One more quick comment on the AP.
Yeah.
I like too how you separated the invoice processing from the payment processing, because
Yes.
like Avid Pay is like a piece of a company called Avid Exchange. They're a gigantic company, and they push the AP side of it. And I was never like always sold on that part of it. But like you pointed out, you could break it out. You could even look to use Acumatica's functioning for that, and then just use the payment to use Acumatica's functioning for that, and then just use the payment piece. I really like that, how you separated that.
Yeah, or there are some other ones out there that you can use for bringing in AP documents as well, besides AvaPay or doing it with Acumatica, and everybody just needs to look and see what the best fit for them is. One thing that I think could be an incredible automation for Acumatica, and I haven't been able to convince Acumatica of this yet, so maybe this podcast will help get people to realize the possibility and then start voting for this change. But we've all seen the Alexa app proof of concept, right? And that's really all it is right now, and it really should be so much more. I've played around with this, and I actually got Alexa glass frames so that I could talk to Acumatica wearing my glasses, walking down the street, right, or walking around. Now, here's where
how much do those cost? I'm curious.
I think they're a couple $100, like $250, and you can put your prescription. You can have prescription lenses put them in. So I got my bifocals lenses in my Alexa glass frames.
Oh, but this is nice. Still only audio. We're not talking like Google Glass here, where it's
this is just very simple. Talk to Alexa and have her talk back to you through the frame on the side of your head near your ear.
Gotcha.
Right? But not only can you listen to Amazon Music, if you have the unlimited Amazon Music like I do when I'm out working in the garden, but here's the concept. Right now, the proof of concept, you can actually download and install, and it will let you ask the inventory stock status of a particular item. Right? It'll answer back that. But in reality, what it should do is if I ask it for a stock status and it says you have a certain quantity, I should be able to say, create a vendor or create a purchase order for the default vendor for quantity X, right? We should be able to do data entry with voice commands so that if we're walking around the warehouse, to be able to instantly create purchase orders with verbal commands like Star Trek, right? Everybody wants their computers to work like Star Trek. We want to be able to tell our computer, do X, Y, Z. Imagine, and we're so close, right? All Acumatica has to do is go back to the business skill that they wrote, add some features like create a purchase order, create an item count record, so that hands-free, we can be walking either on a manufacturing shop floor or a warehouse and doing our job without having to be carrying something, right? I see this as the future of ERP systems, is to start using voice commands to accomplish tasks that used to be I have to get the computer or the laptop or the tablet or the phone app, and I have to go through and actually enter stuff. But why? Why can't we have an automated, request to create a purchase order that then goes through workflow, right? Or go ahead.
This brings up an important business point that I consider often, and I'd love to get your ISV perspective on. So you've got a great idea,
right? Or go ahead.
This brings up an important business point that I consider often, and I'd love to get your ISV perspective on. So you've got a great idea here, and you could easily make ICAN software the Amazon Acumatica ISV partner. Like if someone needs anything Amazon, Alexa, Acumatica, they go to you. But you seem hesitant to do that. It doesn't seem like you lack the skills. I mean, you've been able to operate nuclear reactors. You've got the engineering mindset here to make things happen. From a business standpoint, is there a hesitancy to develop something that Acumatica will likely just take, say thank you, and maybe not copy and paste it, but essentially just make it part of the product? Because I've seen them do this a number of times. And from a business perspective, what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, that is part of it. So skills in the the Amazon business skills area. So we haven't gone through that learning curve. Acumatica already has, right? They've already gone through the learning curve of how to create that business skill and how to make it call Acumatica, yada, yada, yada. So for me, it's like, okay, they could turn around on a dime and do this. And it would be, I mean, even if they just did purchase orders and item transfers and maybe item counts, certain little things like that, or labor charges for a manufacturing job, right? Add certain number of hours of labor, this job, yada, yada, yada. Or add labor, or not labor, items, for step one or whatever of the job. So I think there's some huge opportunity with just 4 or 5 touch points of creating records that could then be, approved or reviewed, but at least the data entry part could go away really quickly if Acumatica kind of saw the possibility. And think of the marketing. You could use like Star Trek characters, in your advertising, right? Acumatica, make it as easy as saying computer, right? So there's all these things that I just see we're not taking advantage of right now that we could. The framework's been laid by Acumatica. Why not do more with it? Right.
Have you looked into pricing much? So we know there's a hardware cost, but Alexa could be, like you pointed out, the glasses, or it could be just the device that sits on the table, or it could be your phone, multiple hardware that you could use. So forget about that. But what about the software part of that? Have you looked into what it takes to actually utilize those skills? Is it per transaction, or do you know how that works?
There's no charges at all for using
really?
Alexa. Yeah.
Interesting. I guess you're just feeding the beast, the AI beast, the more you use it, and that's how they make their money.
I guess so. Unless Acumatica knows of a price that they're having to pay to put it on. But I've installed the Alexa app or the Alexa piece into Acumatica and tested it. It works.
So there could be that skill that you talked about, building that. It's an official like Acumatica skill that you're utilizing.
Yeah. If you go out
they pay the fee.
Alexa, maybe they do. But they've already paid the fee. The business skill's out there.
Assuming it's not on transactional volume that they pay. Yeah, that makes sense then. It's just a one-time investment.
But you would think if there was some type of transactional level thing, that they wouldn't be making that available for free download, right, for anyone to use.
Sure.
So I don't think there is. I think Amazon's wanting to build up all these Alexa skills because that sells more Alexas and more Alexa glass frames. So they're making money the more that people use Alexas. So, hey, I know we're running short on time. I could talk with you about this stuff all day long, and we have at conferences. But I did want to do a shameless plug for our products for Acumatica.
Let's hear it.
So first is Address Verify. And I know there are some people out there that do address verify. Okay, I can have, CPAs and accountants, we love a fixed budgeted amount, right? So what we did is we said, okay, we're going to create an address verify throughout Acumatica. Every address can be verified with a button in Acumatica, unlimited, no extra charges. We just charge a flat $500 a year, and you can verify addresses to your heart's content, which we feel is a better way to provide that functionality for accountants who want to have a fixed budgeted amount each year. The other piece that we have is for people that struggle with applying a large number of documents.
Can I ask you a couple questions
Sure.
on that? One is, what's the service you use on the back end, if you can say so?
So we're calling the USPS. It is only for the United States,
Okay.
but we're calling the USPS. Problem with that is the USPS API, each company would have to get their own account. You store that account into a window that we provide, and then we use that login or that account for doing these address verifications. Now, part of their agreement is that you won't do a mass verification. We're looking into how many seconds delay between verifications we need to have in order not to violate that before we build a mass verify feature.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so we're working on that right now. That'll be in our version 2.0. Is we'll have a screen where you can select what type of address, whether it's a employee or customer or vendor or sales order. Like if you've overridden an address on a sales order, right? You might want to make sure that that's a valid address. An address on a sales order, right? You might want to make sure that that's a valid address that you're shipping to. So we do have that within the orders. We're looking to have a type drop down for a processing screen where you could do mass, but we need to figure out how much of a delay between those we need to have. The other two products that are out there right now that are selling well are mass apply products. So if you have to apply, let's say you have a big payment, and it needs to get applied to 1,000 different invoices or 10,000 different invoices. And you're having to pick and choose throughout the long list in Acumatica. Well, what if you could import in the list of what you wanted applied and how much you wanted applied between and apply from documents and apply to documents? And that list could be different customers or vendors. It could be different doc date. That list could be different customers or vendors. It could be different doc date ranges. It's unlimited. You could have millions of applies, import, preview, see whether or not those applies are valid applies on a preview. And then if they are, click a button and have it process all of those applies for you. The other piece, and that works for both receivables and payables. Payables is, we're seeing it more for people that do an ACH payment, and then they're needing to apply that payment against a whole bunch of different things. So
can you go down to the line level like you're doing internally?
Not yet. Currently, I believe it is based on invoice only, but that's a great suggestion. We're definitely going to be looking at that for version 2 release. And then the last thing, you and I have talked about this. We finally took our flagship product from the GP world, which is our investment assets. We now have it available for Acumatica. So anybody that has pension funds that they manage, that has to deal with mark-to-market, unrealized gain or loss adjustments, anybody that has interest accruals that they need to accrue and then receive at a later date, amortizations of discount or premium on bonds or other types of amortizable investments, the ability to receive dividends and track those dividends against holdings within trading accounts and trading accounts within funds or entities within Acumatica. So labor unions are going to be a great fit for it. Insurance companies, because all insurance companies do, take your premiums out on casualties, right, on events. So, in the GP world, we've got a number of insurance companies in the Caribbean, foundations, holding companies who are buying and selling large numbers of equities. We have the ability to download market values from 20-minute delay, so like end of day market values for all the equities that have a ticker symbol. So it's a great product. It's gonna be awesome in the Acumatica channel, and we're gonna continue to develop and flesh out all the features. The extra features that we have in the GP product will eventually come into the Acumatica product. But we've got a base product now that has all the standard functionality that companies are going to need. Does all the unrealized gain or loss adjustments. When you sell it, it undoes the unrealized and recommends. When you sell it, it undoes the unrealized and records the realized gain or loss. It interacts with cash accounts, not only for the trading cash account, but also a sort of a settlement cash account. So if you're recording transactions on one date and then it's settling on a different date, we actually record the original transaction to the settlement cash account, and then on the date of the settlement, move it with a funds transfer from the settlement cash account to the actual trading account. So great product. I can't say enough about how much this is going to mean for the Acumatica community to have something like this, because one of the things that I've noticed, Sage Intacct actually has an investment assets product. And one of the things that in that business, industry that Acumatica hasn't had has been that product. So yeah, and if people have ideas for great products, we're always open. Send us an email, sales@icansoftware.com. We've looked at cannabis as a potential solution. Maybe you can answer this question for me. What do you know about MaxQ's cannabis solution? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it somewhere in between?
I don't know much about it.
Okay. But it's a big industry in Washington, California, Oregon, out here on the left coast. It's a huge industry, and a lot of ERP products are not going to work with cannabis yet, but Acumatica does. And we've had experience implementing Tilray long time ago, and we think it's a big industry, not only for the primary cannabis cultivator, also all of the manufacturers of new and exotic equipment to automate the farming process. That is starting to build around that, which is perfect.
There's
for
your
Acumatica.
Amazon Alexa skill again.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it, Tim. And like I said, we've got mass verify, mass apply receivables, mass apply payables. We've got investment assets. And who knows what other products we'll come up with for the Acumatica community.
Looking to get into cannabis.
Well, hopefully, maybe we're thinking about it. We're scoping it out. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. If MaxQ's product is a good product, then we're probably not going to develop our own in competition with them. But because MaxQ's our own in competition with them, but because MaxQ's got a good rep had a good rep in the GP world for a long period of time. So I'm curious if there are people out there who've used it. Please let us know what you think, or let Tim know, and he can have a podcast on maybe with them about it.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you real quick, kind of bringing it back to the Great Plains comparison. As you were, since investment assets is your most recent product to transition Acumatica, what would you say? Was it Was it a more pleasant experience developing on Acumatica? Was there more out-of-the-box stuff that you could use that you didn't have to code? How was that experience for you?
I think it was nice because we could utilize the cash account and not have to code the GL side just by writing in L side. Just by writing in GP, we actually had to write to the cash account history or the bank account history, as well as create the journal entries. And with Acumatica, all we had to do was create the cash transaction in the cash account. And then when that got released by Acumatica with an automated schedule, it automatically created the GL for us, right, as part of that release.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's saved. There's things like that in Acumatica where you don't have to do all of it anymore. You can code one section and then its normal coding will take over the rest of the process. So
you feel like it's less lines of code overall, maybe?
Yes, definitely a lot less code. And you really need to be a C# programmer if you're going to customize an Acumatica. I ended up hiring one simply because I've learned a number of programming languages, and learning another one to become an expert on it, I'm too old. I can manage and kind of give suggestions and be the head of product development. But these days, you really need a .NET developer. Hire one out of college. They're out there. A lot of them can't find work right now. And you can hire a young person who has some experience already with C# and object-oriented programming. And you may not pay as much as a lot of the really experienced developers, but you can train them on what you need them to do. And it's well worth the investment. Ideas, they have new ways of looking at things that we sometimes as middle-agers don't pick up on. And so I say, it's finding the right person is more important than finding someone with experience. You can always train somebody if they've got patience, if they've got good, work ethic, if they are sharp. I'm a firm believer in training the young who are sometimes not given a chance because they don't have any experience. So that would be, I'd leave off with that.
Great advice, and fits well with your always learning something new mindset.
Yes.
Thanks, David, for coming on.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of augforums.com, and take care.